Welcome to part two of Be Compliant. This is one of those sessions where compliance is part of your business. It's something that you have to be compliant in the real estate game. But what is compliance all about? Well, it's making sure that we work at a certain standard. We adhere to the code of conduct. We make sure that we are professional. We hold that integrity as we're going forward. Now, in today's session, I'm going to be touching on two topics. And these are two topics that are, well, they start with the sixth letter of the alphabet. It's F. And the reason why I wanted to put it together because it's the two that really has the biggest question mark around it. And what are they that I'm going to be talking about? Well, I'm going to end the session talking about FICA because most of us we know that we have to do it, but sometimes we don't know why we've got to do it. And then we go, well, what do we need to do in order to do it? So we're going to jump into FICA a little bit later, but I want to start with something that is actually even more important than FICA, especially in the real estate game. Now, I know many people are going to say to me, but Stuart, nothing is more important than FICA. Well, let me ask you this. You're a real estate agent, you're earning commission. Wait a minute, you're earning commission. What do you need in order to earn commission? Well, the simple answer is you need an FFC, a Fidelity Fund Certificate. You see, without an FFC, you can't earn commission. And that is what I want to start with today, is the importance around your FFC and how you present it and how you work with it with your particular clients. Now, within the regulations of South Africa, there's an act, and I have the act up on the screen, but you can Google the act because I don't want to give you all those details. But under the PPRA, you required to have an FFC. It's actually a statutory requirement. And there's a big purpose behind it. And when I was doing the research, I was actually quite, I want to say, not shocked, but I was actually pleasantly surprised when I started to research this. You see, having a Fidelity Fund certificate is actually, it's a big responsibility. And the big responsibility that you've got is to make sure that you're holding that FFC in the highest possible level. So there were three key areas of really understanding, well, why is it that I need an FFC? We could do FFCs. No, there's three reasons that I picked out, and they were actually pretty cool that I'll share with you. The first one is actually it's consumer protection. And I sat and I looked at this and I thought, consumer protection? How does a Fidelity Fund certificate give me consumer protection? Well, think about this. You have a stranger that's walking through your house. Now, as buyers and sellers, they are meeting agents for the very first time. They don't know who they are. How do they get to a point that the buyer and seller can say, so you are a legitimate real estate agent and you actually have some credentials? Well, the only way you can do that is with a Fidelity Fund certificate. So, as far as consumer protection goes, it actually gives you that level to say, hey, I'm actually legitimate. And this is what I want you to actually do when you're going out there. I want you to make sure that if you've got your nice little flip folder, have a copy of your Fidelity Fund certificate inside there. When you're having conversations with your buyers and your sellers, make sure that they're aware that you actually hold a Fidelity Fund certificate and that it's valid. And hey, buyer, seller, if you come across an agent that does not have one of these, that is not compliant with a valid FFC, you don't do business with them because maybe they're a criminal. Maybe they're somebody who's trying to just get into a house. Just food for thought. I thought I'd add that. But the first purpose is giving consumer protection because it gives you the validity that you are a genuine real estate agent. You have that license. Oh, that sounds like something from a movie. You have the license to earn commission. Definitely. The second one, well, yep, it's a regulatory uh, in- requirement. I'm not going to repeat that word because that's going to be a hard one to do, but it is a requirement. And the requirement actually allows you to earn commission. Without it, you cannot be paid commission. That is one of the regulations that comes from the government through the actual PPRA, through to all of the agencies onto us. Now, you're going to find that if you're working with conveyancers, there's a very, very high chance that when you do a first transaction with them, they're actually going to ask for a Fidelity Fund Certificate. One from the company to make sure the company is valid, and two from you as the agent. Now, if you don't have, they are not allowed to pay out. That is part of their regulations. They cannot pay out the commission to people that don't have a valid FFC. So that actually brings me back to that right in the beginning. Why do I need a Fidelity Fund? Well, if you want to earn commission, you need a Fidelity Fund Certificate. So there's the second one. The third one, and this is the one that really gave me, I actually felt great about this because it gave me this high level of accountability and professionalism. You see, going out into the actual industry and saying, here's my Fidelity Fund Certificate, I am valid, I've got all of these, it actually shows that I've gone through a particular process. I've actually taken the time to study the industry, to know the industry. I want to make sure that when somebody asks me a question, I'm giving them a truthful and honest, knowledgeable, educated answer. So with the Fidelity Fund Certificate, you could just apply and then just say, well, I'm going to just kind of just do it. But with that Fidelity Fund Certificate, it actually, in order to keep it valid, now you have to go through a qualification process because you cannot remain a candidate or an intern forever. You have to get to the full status. The only way that you can get to the full status is you've got to become qualified. So this gives you that high level of professionalism that adds on to your Fidelity Fund Certificate. So this is great. Now I'm going around as a licensed agent that is valid. I've actually got all those regulations in place so I can earn my commission, but also my clients are going to see trust in me. But now this is great. So I don't really want to carry this massive certificate around with me all the time because, well, I might leave it at the office. So what do I do? How do I make sure that my clients know that I am a valid agent? Well, this is where another regulation comes in with regards to the actual Fidelity Fund Certificate. You see, when you look at your Fidelity Fund Certificate, at the bottom, there's a certificate number. And that number will start with a year. 2020X, whatever that might be. It also has an expiry date. And you need to keep aware of that expiry date because you don't want it to expire. Because remember, expired Fidelity Fund Certificate equals no commission. Just bear that in mind. But that little certificate number at the bottom, what can you do with it? Well, here's the most important part. You need to make sure that you're advertising that you have a valid certificate. And the only way you can do that is by adding that certificate number. So, on things like your business cards, your email signatures, anywhere that you're actually giving out any form of media marketing to the public, make sure that you've actually included that certificate number. Why? Because they can actually research to see, hey, is this valid as you're going through? You also need to include those famous little words, registered with the PPRA. When you've got that on your particular marketing material, business cards, signatures, etc., it now takes you to the point where you've ticked off that compliance. And that's what's so important. You want to remain compliant. So Fidelity Fund Certificates, the big thing there, make sure it's valid. Make sure that you're actually getting to that qualification stage, but also make sure that you're advertising that with that certificate number that starts with a year. So Fidelity Fund Certificates, it's actually your best friend. In fact, maybe you should get a new wallet that you can flip out that has this badge with a Fidelity Fund Certificate on it. That could be a great idea. So let's talk about something that's a little bit more serious. And as I said to you in the beginning, I want to make this a little bit more entertaining. I want to give you some form of education where you actually go, that was pretty cool. So compliance, we know compliance is with a Fidelity Fund Certificate, but the big one out there is FICA. And FICA seems to scare a lot of people off. They almost feel afraid to go up to someone and say, hey, can I have your FICA? because that can actually make it a little bit awkward if they don't know what FICA is. But let me actually give you a little bit behind the scenes as to why FICA is so important. You see, FICA is not just a South African or an agency compliance type of procedure that you've got to follow. In fact, it's international. They may have different names, but FICA is something that is on a global front. Now, why would they have this type of FICA on a global front? Well, the reason behind it, it's to combat certain types of illegal activities. Now you're going, wait a minute, illegal activities? I'm just here to sell properties. Well, let's think about this. Illegal activities such as money laundering, that's a big one. Terrorist financing, oh my gosh, we don't want to do that. Any form of financial crimes, whether it's blue, black, green, silver, orange, whatever color it is, I'm not too sure of the color that's going around this time, or even tax evasion. You see, all of these has a negative effect, not only on the economy, but can also have an effect on the people around you. So when we look at FICA, how can it combat those? Well, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the money that is going through to purchase a particular property is legitimate. If we take the idea of money laundering might be on the back of a big, maybe it's a drug deal, and they're sitting with 10 million rand in cash. Now, what can they do with it? Well, they can't do very much with that cash as it's sitting. Why? Because it is actually illegal money. So what do? Well, they go out and they buy a property with it. They may buy a property for, guess what? For 10 million. They buy that particular property, it then gets transferred, and then they decide to quickly sell it. And they basically sell it, which then goes through a particular legal process. And at the end, they might sell it for, say, 8 million. Now, they had originally 10 million, and now they've got 8 million in the bank account. Now, you might be saying, but now they've just lost 2 million. Well, think about this. That original 10 million, they couldn't do anything with it. They needed to clean it. They needed to wash it. They needed to put it through some form of laundry, money laundering. And that's one of the big reasons why FICA has come into play. Because FICA gives us a way, a tool to eradicate those illegal activities. And the more that we can do that, the better it actually becomes for us. Because you might say, but how can that affect us? Well, that 8 million could be used to now go and buy guns, arms, that could be used to empower their drug cartels. And I'm really taking it down to the bottom lines, but they could do their drug cartels. And then they want to get into your particular suburbs and they want to, no, they won't do that. Hopefully they won't do that. But we want to eradicate all of that. We don't want to be part of that criminal empire. We want to remain clean. Now, it's not only here with the agency, with South Africa, but this is what they're trying to combat worldwide. If you can stop the flow of illegal funds into legal funds, that little conversion, commonly called money laundering, if you can eliminate that, you can actually start to reduce that whole, well, that sounds good and easy to become a criminal. So that's where FICA comes into it. It's to remove all of those particular areas. So as I mentioned, there's also tax evasion. There's also terrorist financing. There's financial crimes that go around where you're wanting to move money in and out. So that's the big thing behind FICA. When you understand that, and I used to put it in the back of my mind, what if this person is doing some kind of illegal activity and they're using my property that I'm wanting to sell with a seller that I've known for the last 15 years to go through this particular process? Well, now I make sure that I do the FICA. So now you know why FICA is so important. The next is, well, let's take FICA to that point of, well, what do we actually need? Well, the big thing we need to do is we need to identify their clients. It's not a simple process saying, I can see your face because, well, a lot of the Hollywood stars have got plastic faces. Oh, that was a stab. But you can have anything on your face. It's not about identifying the person, it's identifying to their legal side. So, what do we need? We also need to identify them. We need to make sure that we can also know the source of the funds. Where's that money actually coming from? Because if you go, where did it come from? And he goes, oh, we actually managed to get through the airport with $100 billion worth of drugs. And we convert, well, obviously, we can see that nobody's going to tell you that right up front. So we need to make sure that the actual source of funds has been recognized. We also, through the FICA process, we need to monitor the transaction because, and this is something that can catch a lot of us out. In the beginning, it may start as a very simple transaction. But as they're going through, suddenly there's some unique activities that starts to come about. And we need to monitor the transaction from start to finish to make sure that, well, there's nothing illegal. You see, the criminals out there are extremely educated. They know their ways to do things that, well, it's going to sound legitimate in the beginning. And if you do your research, it is. But then as you start going through that process, suddenly things start becoming a little bit suspicious. I'm applying for a bond. Oh, no problem. I couldn't get a full bond. We're only getting an 80% bond. I'll do 20% as a deposit. Well, you know what? Let me actually do a 60% deposit. I'll actually do an 80% deposit just to. These are suspicious activities as you're going through. And the last, it's the actual transparency through this entire journey, making sure that if there is something there, it's made transparent and it's shared with, well, we've got compliance officers here within the actual eXp. So you want to make sure of all of that as you're going through this process. Now, I said in the beginning that you need to identify that client, and I was going a bit ahead of the gun there. What do you actually need? Well, when we start looking at identifying, we need to have a look and say, well, there are three types of entities out there that is common in the South African market. The first is the natural individual, the natural person. That's like you and me, that's natural. The second is the legal entity. Those are your companies that are out there. And the third is actually trusts. Now, I know companies and trusts are very similar, but there is a separation. So, yes, there are many others, but these are the three most common of the actual entities out there. So, the natural person, the legal entity, and the trusts that are out there. Now, once you can actually go through this process of identifying, is it a natural person buying? Is it a company that's buying? Or is it a trust that's buying? It will then open up the door to say, now I know what is needed to actually ask from those individuals. And I'm going to come into that a little bit later. The second, to make sure of the compliance within FICA, we need to make sure that when we do get all of the documents and we've got all that information, we actually have to store it for a minimum of 5 years. That's as per the regulation. The reason for that is if something happens 3, 4, 5, 4 years and 11 months down the line, and they need to go back just to pull out those particular records to say, hey, is this, you need to make sure that the records are kept secure. So having it into a storage facility, make sure that you scan it, make sure it is your responsibility. For many, they say, it's not my response. Yes, it is. You're dealing with that particular client. You're getting those particular documents. Make sure that it is stored in a very safe location. So for me, what I was always doing, I wouldn't want to go and save all of the paper records because then the office would start to fill up. I would make sure that everything is scanned in and put into the cloud into a very safe location, making sure that you can go through. Now, this is one of the reasons why in our system, you're asked for all of these documents because guess what we do for you? We store all these documents so that if you don't have it, at least we do. Because remember, we need to protect from an agency and the company, but we're also looking after you to make sure that you become compliant and safe as well. But it's always good to keep that in case something does happen. The third of it is if you're meeting with a particular client and they're not like openly dodgy, but they've got one eye, they've got a wooden leg, they've got a hook on their right hand, they've got a parrot on their left shoulder, and they keep their sentences short to "arr." It's a little bit suspicious as to where they're coming from. If you come across anybody that's suspicious, it's rather important to make sure that you make somebody aware. Who? It starts out with our transactional specialists. You just go in and say, hey, I'm dealing with this particular client. I just want to make you aware. It is the responsibility of our transactional specialist to make sure that our compliance officer within the company is notified so that it is made aware of. Now, even if a transaction does not go through, it's very important to make sure that you do report any suspicious activities. Why? Because they might have suddenly got a bit of a whiff that, hey, you're onto them. So they pull out. But what do? They go to the very next agent and they do the exact same thing to them. And that agent might not have picked up anything. And that transaction, they'll try and push and let it go through. So make sure that if you see anything, you're actually making sure that you actually report anything that looks a bit suspicious. Now, I mentioned to you that you need to keep the monitoring of that client. And this is where the suspicious can also come in. You want to make sure that if month one, things are good, month two, something's just not right. And it's just getting under your skin, and you've got that gut feeling that something needs to be speak up about it. Make sure, reach out to leadership, reach out to transaction to say, hey, by the way, I'm not too sure about this. If you're dealing with the conveyancers, make sure that you're having conversations with them as well so that you can go through. Right. Let me circle back to one of the big things here, which is what do we need? And the reason why I wanted to put this right at the end is because I know that you, as a real estate agent, you own one of these, which is a pen, because this is the wet ink. You also own probably a few pages of these. It's could be a pine tree, it could be something that's been recycled, but it's a device that you can actually write on. And the reason why is I want to make sure that you kind of have a very high level understanding of what is needed. So you've had a conversation with your client, being a buyer, and you have the conversation that they're going to buy it in their own personal capacity. Right, personal capacity means they're a natural individual, natural person. All right, so what do we need? Well, one, we need to see all the different parties. So we know that there's a husband and there's a wife. Okay, so there's two parties, two buyers. What do we need from them? Well, we need the certified ID or passport. Why certified? Why ID? Why passport? We need to basically validate. You see, these documents are created by third party companies, being the government, and issued. Can they be fraudulent? Yeah, sometimes they can be, which means we'll need to validate them. But this will give us, okay, I see your profile picture. I'm pretty sure that this picture in your ID, you were pretty intoxicated when this was taken, because I've never seen anybody's ID with a big smile on their face. It's always serious, like you're sitting about to take one of those pictures to get incarcerated. Anyway, that's a different topic. You need a copy of the IDs so that you can validate them. It gives ID numbers or passport numbers, full names, so that you can do that identification. The second is a proof of residence. All right. And it cannot be older than 3 months. All right. So not older than 3 months. But why proof of residence? Well, think about this. Is a criminal really going to give you his home address or her home address? Highly unlikely. They're going to give you something fraudulent because they don't want the actual coppers to come and catch them. So you need that physical address. You need some form of proof of address that actually ties them in. But what it also does, it also shows that they are a person that actually has a residential address. They're in some area where you can actually physically go to them and see them and work with them on this particular deal. So it's always a great way of actually making sure that this is legitimate when they start looking at it. Now, the great thing is with the proof of address, you've got the ID and you can tie the two up. Now, if you get an ID and it's for John Smith and the proof of residence is for Mary Parker, well, there's a problem there because they don't tie up. We need to make sure on the paperwork, the ID and passport matches the proof of address. Bang, so that we can go from there. The third, and this is the one which really becomes a little bit uncomfortable, is the source of funds. Where are you getting your money from? Now, to go and ask them directly, hey, where are you getting your money from, could actually put them off. But what you can do is you can actually do it in a very roundabout way. Hey, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a lawyer. Oh, that's great. At what firm? Oh, I'm at this particular firm. Oh, that's fantastic. So that's the reason why you're upgrading your property and going, oh, absolutely, because I can afford it now because I'm earning. You see, through general conversation, you can start to identify the source of income. Now, the one thing that's absolutely great with this, when you're doing all of that, you can then lead on to, all right, so are you going to be paying cash or are you going to be taking out a bond? And in that particular conversation, they say, well, cashing. I say, well, where are you getting the cash from? Did you win the lotto? I mean, this is a 4.5 million rand property. And they'll turn around and have that conversation with you. I always find by doing it in a very soft manner, you will actually find the proof of income. Now, that doesn't mean that that's all good and great because they could be a great con artist and tell you anything. It still needs to be validated. And when it gets validated, well, the easiest part on that, well, we know that if you're going to go for a bond, we need to get you into an originator, make sure that someone is going to get you the actual bond. They're going to ask for, guess what? Proof of funds. That's the pay slip, bank statements that will come through. And the great thing here is you can actually tie in with the bond originator to make sure that they can do that so that there's a bit of privacy. But what about cash? Well, I've actually just said them straight up. You got the cash? Let's get the bank statement out and let's make sure that it's there because we don't want to delay this. We don't want to make sure that we give the hopes of our seller up, but you're still waiting for those cash to come in from somebody. If it's something that's coming in from overseas, just give us those proofs so that we can validate it. I've always found as an agent, when you're going in to asking for proof of funds, where's that source coming from? The direct approach sometimes puts up a wall. But if you put it into a light conversation and really just go, hey, when's it coming through? Because of my seller, and use your seller as the reason, would love to know the duration. How long is it going to come? Is it going to need to be cleared? And then once you've got all of that, well, now we'll send that document, that proof through to the conveyancers so that the conveyancers can type it in to the actual agreement so that they know the timelines. And now we've got a legal standing. You see how you can turn that around, get those proof of funds in the form that is required. So that's for natural individuals. But then the person says, well, no, I'm actually going to use my company to buy the property. Well, yeah, it becomes a little bit more complicated because natural person, let's say it's right at the bottom. Above them is the actual company, or it could also be a trust. What do we need out of that? Well, we need to identify that entity. And there's documents that come. So there's CK documents, there's trust documents that'll actually confirm the actual identity of the trust or of the actual company. So we need all of that. Now, what's great, there goes the voice. Can you believe it? When you actually have those particular documents, here's a great thing. On that document, it will actually specify either on a trust, beneficiaries, or on a company, directors or members. So you've actually got all the details. You'll actually have names and you'll have ID numbers. And you say, oh, well, that's great. I can see in your company you've got 4 directors. What we need to do is we need to validate each one of those people. So we got to take it down to the natural individual. Now, why is that so important? Well, let's think of this as a scenario, and I'll use a company. It's a company of 4 directors. 3 of them are as clean as a whistle. The fourth one is actually an investor in the company. And what he's doing is he's using it to launder money. Now, if you only get the first 3 directors' details and you do the search, everything's going to come through clean. However, it's that fourth director that could actually be the criminal. So we need to make sure that we at a high level have all of their IDs, their proof of residence. Just remember, natural person, we want all of that. Now, most of the time when you deal with a company secretary, they should have a lot of those details already on file. So you don't have to go to each one of the directors. Company secretaries are great people that can actually give you a lot of that information and be your liaison to get that information. Now, once you've got that, well, proof of funds will be from the company. What is the company doing? And they will get that. But there's a certain element of this that we need to identify. Who's the beneficiary? You see, when we start looking at a company, there may be four directors, but there might be one person that's going to be signing everything. There might be one person that could be a beneficiary, someone who's a major shareholder that will have a major benefit if this property sells, or the beneficiary on a trust. You need to identify who that person is. And for me, the biggest way that I would do it is when I've had a company that had four directors, I would actually joke and I'll say, so on the sale of this property, who's the director that's going overseas? Who's going to take the money and go and have a wonderful holiday? And they always joke and they say, oh, I'm pretty sure it's Bill. I'm sure Bill's going to do it because he's the one that has the biggest share. Bang. Now I know who's the main person. I need to make sure I have their details down to the depth. So those are just quick little tips and tricks that actually comes out. Ultimately, it doesn't matter if it's a company or trust, we need to take it all the way down to that natural individual because a company or trust is just in the air. A natural individual, you can walk up, shake their hand, give them a hug, and then pat them on the back when they've purchased the property and say, well done, we'll buy from you again. You need to make sure that you're always going down to that natural person. So that's one of the big key elements of all of this. So I've always thought, why do I need to do this? That seems like a lot of hard work, going and finding out the RDs, the proof of residence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, let me give you something. If you don't do it, and this is the truth, if you don't do it, and I'm talking to you specifically, if you don't do it and something goes south, and I'm talking not south like South Africa's south, I'm talking south like way south, something goes bad, and it starts looking like a bit of a criminal activity, and they start doing investigations, and they start looking, what actually happened 3 years ago? They ask you for the details, they ask you for the documents, you don't have them, but your name is all over it. Even though you fall under an agency that maybe you've left, here's what can happen to you. You as an individual, you as the agent, could have jail sentence. You could have up to a 10 million rand fine in your personal capacity. Now, I'm not too sure of any agent that's ever done a single deal that's earned up to 10 million rand in actual commission. That's interesting. So you need to make sure that you remain compliant through this process. And you can use this to your clients. They go, well, I don't want to do this. So, well, look, if something goes south, if something goes bad, I am not going to be held liable for a potential 10 million rand, over earning maybe a 30, 50, or 100,000 rand commission. We need to make sure that we're compliant. Now, from a company point of view, the scalability is even bigger because it's not just one agent. There might be more. So they do investigations. But again, there's jail sentence for principals and owners of the company. And the company itself could be fined up to 50 million rand. So there's big implications if we don't follow it. That's why compliance is so important. You need to make sure that you're actually not only just ticking boxes, but you're actually doing it. You're getting the documents and putting everything through, storing it, making sure that you're monitoring that particular process. As you're going and monitoring that process, everything is great. You've got your Fidelity Fund certificates. So guess what? Everything's good. It's a full green light. You can earn commission. That's why today I wanted to talk about your Fidelity Fund certificates and FICA because they do go hand in hand. Without FICA, you cannot earn commission. Without a Fidelity Fund certificate, you cannot earn commission. So just be compliant. I know that you've got your Fidelity Fund certificate. Just create the simple scripts like what I've shared with you today to have a conversation. Don't make it, oh, this is important. I need your ID. I need this. Just have it in a general conversation. Do it when you first meet the people. Your buyers and sellers, their excitement's at the highest. When you're taking a mandate, ask for the proof of residence, which can be a lot of documents. Make sure that you get the IDs so that you've got everything on file. When you meet a buyer and they put in that offer, say to them, hey, I just need your ID. I need to have that FICA so that we can actually put this entire pack together to go through. It's so important because at the end of the day, you want to earn commission. You see, my closing quote for this, and really took me some time to think about this, You see, compliance, it's not about just ticking boxes, because most of us do have a check sheet and we tick everything off. It actually goes deeper. It's about building trust with your buyers, trust with your sellers, your landlords, your lessees and lessors. It's also about protecting your clients. The last thing you want is to have a fraudulent deal that comes through to buy a property with a seller that you've known for 15 years, only to realize that it was a money laundering. There's going to be a lot of seizing happening as far as the actual government coming in and holding those properties. Your seller's going to be without a property, without their funds, because nothing can actually be transferred if it's illegal money. So you want to protect your clients. But lastly, you want to earn your commission with confidence. So be compliant.